tonight's session of the Queen's University of Belfast Literary and Scientific Society! Most wonderful. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight we are here to discuss the motion of this House believes NI can have a post-sectarian election. Pay no attention to the empty seat there. Captain Gallagher will be back with us momentarily. So, is that quite quick? You want me to shit! I didn't hear anything, Mr. McDonald. You big snitch. Yes, indeed. So, as you may also notice, we have one fewer speaker on each side this evening. Hopefully that will afford us some extra time to ask questions, as you all seem to have been bursting at the seams for the past couple of weeks to ask questions which we sadly hadn't had the time for. So in the vein of moving things swiftly along, we'll get right on to announcements, of which I have few. The spreadsheet for the suggested motions for next semester will be going up tomorrow at midday. To be clear, this is a spreadsheet that you add the motions to, so it'll be pretty much blank to start off with. There'll be lots of different tabs at the bottom, so politics, religion, yada yada yada. And you can add whatever you like to it. One moment, Ms. Campbell. Yes, so those will then be collected and debated at our internal meeting in the first week of December, I believe. We've yet to set an exact date, but it will most likely be I think Tuesday the 5th. So please, if you'd like to shift the turn card for next semester to make it just as good as this one was, then please add your motions and you can make it along to the internal meeting. Ms. Campbell, you want to say something about that?
Is it going to be I'm just doing a cute impersonation, you know. Is it going to be a tab for economics this time? Because that was a problem. Yeah.
Was it not last time?
Yeah.
I mean, as long as you don't be ridiculous, you can add your own tabs. I'm pretty sure it can't specifically stop you from creating tabs.
Are you making Ireland's tabs?
I mean, if you can think of like 20 different motions, all of it. You type it down, bits do tend to be our best candidates, so by all means, I would encourage it. Otherwise, also at midday tomorrow, a poll will be going up on the Literific about charities that we want to support. You may remember I mentioned this last week. I didn't quite get around to actually getting started this week. So basically, there are 4 right charities. Let's see if I can remember them. TZ Rising, PIPS, is that how you say that one? It's not TIPS, PIPS. There's Shelter NI, and there's, I don't remember the 4th. Anyone remember the 4th one?
Shivers on.
Right, there's a 4th one, I don't recall it. Food Bank. Side Belfast Food Bank, that's what it is.
Like told the presidents in our hand.
Yes, exactly. So,
doesn't care about food bank.
Stop! So yes, we obviously are relatively new to the fundraising media, and so we don't, to be frank with you, we don't expect it to raise massive amounts of money. So the money that we do raise, we think would be best served going towards one specific cause. So the way the polls going to work is you can vote for as many as you like, but whichever the most popular one is by basically Thursday next week will be put to your rapid line vote of the House. And as long as no one objects and manages to work the House into a frenzy against the most popular one from the forum, we will ratify it, and that will be the one we support with any fundraising events that we do. Other announcements, none that I can particularly think of. Ms. Belfast? Yes, not really. This for the record, folks. This is really audience participation time.
Other organizations have already come out with like their Christmas dinners and parties and plans. I'm wondering when you're going to release somewhere.
I'm desperately scanning the room for Mr. O'Neill. Mr. O'Neill is hiding behind his laptop. If I tell you with a straight face that it will be soon,
That's why he's on my laptop, right?
yes, right. See, Mr. O'Neill never stopped working. Even right now, he's hard work, sorting these things out. For what it's worth, we are hopefully having some sort of movie night. I'm hoping the last week of November. Actually, just put your hands. How many people, that's week 10. How many people would have deadlines in week 10?
How much was it?
That's kind of, I already know, so I presume that it might have. In any event, I can think of. Mr. Here's a good night for you. Mr. Burr, where's our guest chair?
See, that's what I'm trying to figure out myself.
He's wandering aimlessly about Queen.
That's alliance for you.
Anyway, let's move swiftly on. Mr. Rodgers, please. Let's move swiftly on to what is clearly the most anticipated part of everyone's evening. It's the reading of the minutes from last week. So last week was the second ordinary meeting. The motion was this House would blaspheme, and the minutes shall be read by our beloved Secretary, Mr. Peter Dunn.
The sixth ordinary meeting of the 169th session of the Literary and Scientific Society took place on the 2nd of November 2017, was attended by 53 members. After the President's, let's say, overexcitable entrance, he speeded through the notice and plunged straight into the private members' business. Honorary Life Member Mr. Fionnbharr Rodgers, surprise, surprise, and Life Member Business, he wished to address to the House, of which the President had most cruelly kept from the House for a whole 2 weeks. Shame. He'd written the piece of business to our eternal leader, Paul Ciaran, on a matter which apparently has plagued the university, that of the lack of gowns visible for our queens. A nuclear option was mentioned. Miss Aisha Bellavas, speaking for small people everywhere, argued that gowns simply just don't look good on people who are under 5 feet. Mr. Ryan Neal said the only real question here was Finn's sanity. Mr. Rupert Doherty suggested the return to gowns should only be a reality if we choose the colour of such garments. As the wearer of nearly exclusively marble hoodies, amongst other things, our external convener, Mr. Dobbin, welcomed the abolition of gowns, but commented that President and I could keep ours, as apparently we look so damn cheap. Well, of course, I would move on. The second item of business was proposed by Mr. Morgan Hickman, who asked if the House would like to support the move of Belfast City Council supporting their changing of the legal voting age to 16. Mr. Liam Mackle was the first to respond. He suggested with the rise of social media nowadays in politics, that those of 16 to 18 age group would be more vulnerable to this manipulation. Mr. Scott Moore responded by questioning the logic that it would be perfectly legal to have sex with your MLA or MP at 16, but not being able to vote for them. On the contrary, Ms. Gallen countered Scott's comment by saying that one couldn't buy scissors until the age of 18. The Honorary Life Member, Mr. Gallagher, then proposed to the House that it should send its condolences to Councillor Nathan Anderson, a former Vice President of the Students' Union and a frequent speaker here at Literific over the years. His wife, who has been through the awful trauma of miscarriage, could not get a visa to live with Northern Ireland. A vote was taken and the House voted unanimously to extend its sympathies to Mr. Anderson. It was then on to a lightning round, the President's questions, which was started by Mr. Matthew Sullivan. With nothing getting past his BDI, he noted that the President was looking sharper than usual this evening, and thus asked the President if he indeed had a haircut. He had indeed. More pressing issues followed, with Miss Bellavas asking whether the President's neutrality meant that he was in fact siding with the oppressor. The President, ever the dramatic, pronounced that there was nothing more that he would wish to impress as many people as he could. Yep, you heard it here first. The President then introduced our guest chair for the evening, Dr. Reverend Paul Bailey, a previous President of the Union Debating Society at Queen's and a theology lecturer at Union Theology College. The motion was then introduced at this House with blasphemy, and a vote taken on prior opinion, which read 17 in favour, 13 against, and 11 abstentions. Opening the debate this evening was Mr. Ryan Neal. Not known for being understated, Mr. Neal proceeded to call the term blasphemy useless as a political or moral rhetoric, reasoning that it's completely up to individual interpretation to argue what is considered as blasphemy. Continuing the argument, he noted that it had just been the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, which dramatically changed the face of Christendom. Luther, he stated, was considered to be blasphemous by the Catholic Church, but now attitudes have changed, and he is not. He concluded by saying that it was the sum duty of the House to vote the proposition this evening. Maiden speaker Miss Erin Burnett opened for the opposition, looking at the culture and semantics of the motion. She argued in order for one to be blasphemous, you must hold a derogatory intent to God rather than the institution of a church, for example. She also stated that the United Nations was on their side, and it's certainly good to hear that they're keeping up with Literific debates. She went on to argue that just because you can do something doesn't make it wise. And although the opposition wouldn't make blasphemy illegal, she argued that resorting to religious defamation is simply lazy. Continuing for the proposition was Mr. Scott Moore. He advocated for absolute freedom from and of religion, and argued that the term blasphemy is illegitimate premise. He went on to say that everything could be considered as blasphemous if the church, for example, so decided to label it as such. He concluded by pleading to the House to be intolerant of intolerance and to support the proposition on the motion. Second up for the opposition was our second maiden speaker of the evening, Miss Sarah Gallagher. For the speech ranging from Father Ted to human rights, pretty broad, she began by saying that indeed we all do have human rights, and thus the right of freedom of expression is one of them. We also have responsibilities that come with those rights. As an example, she explained that one wouldn't swear in front of a 5-year-old, just as one shouldn't blaspheme in front of religious people, she argued. At the core of the argument, that was you can criticise and even satirise religion without needing to be blasphemous. Mr. Conor, who was also making his maiden speech, continued the argument for the proposition. He argued that Christianity would be able to withstand an attack of blasphemy, and stated that forced reverence is clearly not reverence with respect. He claimed his side represented the democratic imperative that we show respect to those who we disagree with. Rounding up with a quote on all, and I had to mention this as an English student, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right of telling people what they do not want to hear. Third up for the proposition was Mr. Daniel Lowe, who reasoned that the motion predicated the existence of a God. As if there was no God, strange enough, there'll be nothing to blaspheme about. He argued that Jesus Christ was the only central religious figure whose name was regularly used as a curse word, for no justified reason. He concluded by arguing there was no necessary case in which blasphemy should ever be used. Concluding for the proposition was Mr. Lee Mackle, who accused the opposition of falling into a myopia by fixating on Christianity. He argued that the opposition had neglected religions such as Hinduism and Islam, asserting that blasphemy was indeed, on occasion, a necessary evil. The laws of respect, liberty and fraternity were won by those of actions who were at the time considered to be blasphemous. Mr. Morgan Edmund concluded for the opposition and thus the debate. He argued that the proposition were advocating to further Western liberalism, and in some cases humanism. This, he then went on to argue, was a purely ideological and institutional perspective that then uncovered the bias of the proposition. He concluded by arguing that the proposition had also distorted the motion, and there should be no middle ground of whether or not one should be able to blaspheme. Questions were then heard from Miss Aisha Bellavets, Miss Lauren Carberry-O'Neill, Mr. Matthew Bradley, Mr. Hugh Dobbin, Mr. Conor Neal, and Miss Christine Fleming. After remarks from our guest chair, which were both amusing and informative in equal measure, the President took a vote on speakability, which read 15 votes for propositions, 5 for the opposition, and 10 abstentions. Thus, the motion was carried. May I take minutes?
Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. So, I believe we're now on to private members' business. And once again, I have walked up here without my iPod, which I very much need, because once again, Mr. Rodgers, the HLM, has deemed it necessary to email in a piece of private members' business. So,
As the Constitution requires.
yes, technically required under the Constitution, but nevertheless, why do I have so many notifications? Clearly, someone prepared. I wasn't aiming for that, Derek. I just submitted it somehow. So, I'll take one piece of private members' business while I'm looking for this. Mr. McDonald, our treasurer.
remember the 8th of November, fake news, Putin and Trump. So it's been just over a year since Donald Trump had elected. I was wondering Shame. I was wondering what everyone's thoughts were on his terrible 100 days and further on.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I shall go with Mr. Dobbin first.
It's been a good year.
On your page. This is actually, sorry to interrupt, Dobbin, but this is a very important time for me to mention that technically, under the Constitution, the President has sole discretion under the standing orders. So from now on, I am laying down a standing order that says points of intervention, order, whatever, from Mr. Dobbin can only be made if he is already standing. Special treats.
That singles me out, that's bullying.
It's effective leadership.
Literific's been my safe space.
Did we vote against or for safe spaces?
We voted against them.
There we go. Anyway, Mr. Dobbin, very sorry.
No, it began and ended with saying that I thought it's been a good year. Overshadowed by the semantics.
An interesting point there, Mr. Dobbin. Who would care to do next? As our resident American, Miss Dallas.
It has been a very bad year for the United States. The people who are probably the worst affected are undocumented people because they have very little civil rights and their rights have been further and further eroded by President Donald Trump. In fact, a member from my religious community yesterday was taken up by ICE, which is immigration enforcement, even though she had not committed a crime, and put in jail, which is unconstitutional. So it's going pretty bad. There have been victories on the left. The left is expanding. Yesterday was a really big win for the left. A lot of Democrats took back seats in states and local offices. However, there needs to be more done. Time will only tell how much President Trump will affect overall the future of our country. Right now, it's looking brighter than it has for most of the year, but it's been pretty bad all around.
Thank you, Mr. Dallas. Mr. Miller, you seem to wish to respond to that, so.
It's just incomprehensible to me how anybody could consider Trump good. And I know it's kind of a cliche point at this stage, but like during the election campaign, he referred to 7/11 as an awful tragedy. He said he had a conversation with the president of the Virgin Islands. Trump is the president of the Virgin Islands in front of an audience of African diplomats. He spoke of a country called Namibia. Now, there's a country called the Gambia, and there's a country called Namibia. There is no Namibia. That doesn't exist. Right?
What about Doria? You sure Trump hasn't made it?
My point is, even if you look at how stupid he is, if you look at what his ghostwriter in the Art of the Deal said about it, like about him having a 5-minute attention span, is that really value the president?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. I will ask members of the House to please keep their mutterings to the bare minimum whilst people hold the floor. Tag room. Mr. Doherty.
I would like to quote not two Guardian articles because the Guardian is rubbish. I want to quote two independent articles.
You call the Guardian rubbish with the independent good. It's not even a newspaper anymore.
So, one is by Mark Steele, a fantastic writer, because you are a socialist, who said that having him in the White House is a bit like having SpongeBob SquarePants in the White House, because they're basically doing the exact same thing, which is not really existing, not really doing anything of any note, and basically being a cartoon character. I'd also like to quote an article I saw yesterday, which simply read as its headline, "Over 4,000 tweets and nothing of actual note."
Thank you very much, Mr. Doherty. Would anybody else care to make a point on business? Mr. Rodgers, yes.
Yes, this has not been a bad year for the United States. This has been a typical year in the history of the United States. Very short history, which has been the history of oppression, with brief and very fleeting intervals of liberty, which has lasted only as long as before someone gets shot in the head. Usually at Canada.
I'm not entirely sure if that beats me out for the darkest statement thus far. I think it's a good contender. Any final spelling?
I honestly I don't believe that Trump is real. He can't, he can't be serious. He can't. He's an adult, he can't.
Ghostbusters.
I'm very welcome to our next piece of parliamentary business, which I will attempt to read through at a decent clip. So this was sent in by Mr. Rodgers, honorary life member. He writes, Dear Mr. President, I would like to suggest to you that what this society really needs is a pet, and I would go further to suggest that the acquisition of a Literific wombat would be most beneficial for all, from the lowliest ordinary member to the most waistcoated grandee. And I'd like to make an observation here. The most waistcoated grandee sounds to me like someone who's wearing more than one. Yes, exactly. There are many positive qualities, he writes, which wombats do possess and could bring to the table. For instance, this society has tended towards charitable endeavours, from the Live Below the Line challenge, not fun, to the Dry January challenge as well. And I quote, you can shove that up your gudkin. And you may well be aware that the northern hairy-nosed wombat is critically endangered as the species currently stands. And for the Literific to be seen to adopt one could be a great boon to the society standing on the international stage, and may even make Ciaran Lumley say lovely things about us, followed by a word which I presume is Irish, so I'm not going to say.
No, it's the word for.
I attempted to circumnavigate that.
There's no W in Irish.
I do that. I do that. There's also a significant amount of evidence to suggest that wombats eat rhododendrons, and thus go a long way to keeping the population of the flowering nest in check. In his final paragraph, he writes, I believe that this motion has been agreed to be seconded by our esteemed tech officer and further esteemed Matthew Bradley, BEM. What does BEM stand for?
British Empire Minimum.
British Empire Minimum. Congratulations! And so I look forward to your ruling on that matter, whether you shall agree to giving a needy wombat a good and loving home, or whether you shall let them all die in the rotten cold whilst we slave away inside, throwing back and forth some awful motion. Oh, sorry, some motion like this house believes the Nazis were awful crack. Or some oil dribble such as that. Yours sincerely, Fionnbharr Rodgers, HLM. So, as some of you may have noticed, if you were in the Literific about a month ago, I'm rather surprised that Mr. Rodgers didn't comment on this at all, even in passing. The society does technically have a pet of sorts, at the very least it has a mascot, the Literific cat.
Mascot, not a pet.
Mascot, not a pet, so you think we need an actual pet? Mr. Bradley, seeing as how you seconded this
Right, I may speak at length. Where are wombats from? Right, anyone?
Australia.
Australia, yes. Racial diversity, that's 1 point. That's pretty good. Okay, wombats, quite small. That's good. It can sort of hurry around the debate, and it'd be really lovely. Also, I'm over here in Tech Corner, as I like to call it, and Candy Corner is way over there. Look at the size of me. I want some of that Candy Corner. Now, what we could do is we could put a plate on the back of the wombat, and go over to Candy Corner. This isn't just about me. I know there are people at that side of the room as well, but let's be honest, there's a certain distance here. Also, I think, you can get quite lonely, and I think there's some new members of the society that haven't fully got into it. A wombat would be really nice. And say you're in a speech and you think it's going pretty badly, the wombat could clop onto the table and you just cheer up, and it would be a really lovely thing for society to have. And I think we should get a wombat and call it Kevin.
A beautifully impassioned speech there, everybody. Yes, Michael, sorry, for nothing, sorry.
Why doesn't the society acquire a pet tarantula like our unit?
No!
We could use to terrorise members who don't stand up on making points of information.
I do stand up, sir. I don't need to be terrorised.
Punishment will spit the crane.
Exactly. Get heavens moving stupid. I'll do that nightmare inducing. Mr. Sullivan.
I mean, the idea of a wombat going around with a plate of sweet sauce does sound really appealing. But, coming up onto the table and clipped along, well, that sounds really nice. Like, I think the wombat's more likely to sort of crawl up someone's leg, bite them, and then take a shit in the corner. He's not going to be doing these things.
Mr. Gallagher. Yes,
I'm 2 points. Why the hell am I talking about this? One, I would definitely not recommend a wombat. I've never heard the noise those things make. It is extremely loud and blood curdling to the point it makes a tiger sound. The word I was going to use would actually be offensive, so I won't use it. But on another point, if you really must insist on getting an animal that we're going to look after, can I suggest it's one that doesn't that has the greatest protection over its hearing ability, so it doesn't have to listen to us ramble on and on and on and on and on. May I suggest a goldfish? Therefore?
Goldfish. I like that. We can do that whole thing of, every time it goes to sleep for a bit, we switch it out for a new one, and then no one ever has to know that terror.
You say for your presidents.
Yes, that's pretty much what we do. Mr. Clark.
I mean, the goldfish does sound cheaper than importing a wombat and probably getting a license for that or something.
That's true. I'll take one final point from you. Look so sad, Mr. McDonald. I've got to take your point.
Thank you. So, on behalf of the Treasury, thanks for that. So, the most we can afford, unfortunately, is a Tamagotchi. If we can all hand your money into Metcalf, we can afford it.
Let's decide Tamagotchi. I think we're not great for time. I'll take a really brief part of members' business. Someone wants to look really enthusiastic. Who are you pointing to?
Kira's our mom.
Kira, okay. Ms. Campbell.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make it brief. What happened yesterday with us all watching Priti Patel's flight across the world or whatever, I think that was the most enjoyable experience I've had in politics since at least 2015. But I also want to make the serious point that the fact that her political downfall distracted from what Boris Johnson has done and how he has increased the prison sentence of this poor woman who is probably innocent is an absolute disgrace. And frankly, he should be the one who gets sacked instead of her.
Here.
Do any of our particularly informed members have any comments? Good sir, in the back there.
Glad you know the name.
You don't have the right to something up the top.
The most interesting fact I found by this is the fact that she wasn't sacked. The fact that she resigned of her own accord, which is probably why Boris Johnson is still there as well. Our Prime Minister doesn't have the power to get rid of her own cabinet. Does that not say something terrifying about our government? About their incompetence?
Good point, sir. Anyone else? Yes, good sir.
Is just on the last speaker's point, I think there's a misunderstanding. It's quite often the decorum for a minister to resign rather than be sacked. That is generally how things are done.
Thanks, folks.
I would actually go one further than advocating for Boris Johnson to step down. I believe that we need an end to this weak, ineffectual, hard Brexit Tory government. We need a complete end to it because it's illegitimate in the first place, like in the eyes of the British public, because they're not happy with the government giving $1 billion to the DUP, and it's good for us and all. But Scotland's not getting that. Wales isn't getting that. You know what I mean? So, we need an end to this ineffectual, weak Tory government.
Mr. Thornton?
Just to comment on the last speaker's comment. I would happily take 1 billion of the British government that all the rest of them isn't going to get, and comment that it is not illicit in any way the coalition between Tories and the DUPs. In the eyes of the public, doesn't make an illicit in any way, shape or form. So I would happily take 1 billion or more from the British government.
That'll have to conclude this evening's round on private management business, and we shall move swiftly on to President's questions. Does anybody have any questions for me this evening? Mr. Rodgers.
Yes. My little hemp sheet.
Yes, sir.
Says that the first speaker of the evening, and the second speaker for the proposition, is Miss Ciaran Campbell.
Yes.
Should I debate in character this evening?
Expecting an offer as that is, I frankly, I'm rather reluctant to hear any more speeches about the European Union.
I was office the other day. I said to Chris Little, Brussels is class.
Campbell, when did you get there? Yes, unfortunately, Miss Campbell had to...
I just defend myself.
Yeah, probably best.
I'm just not feeling very well.
There you go.
There you go.
Question
I
asked.
think I'm drinking too much milk.
Quick question answered. Just Ms. Carver and Neil brought my attention, just to remind you about the sweepstake thing. Again, put in £2, or put up people that you could win a decent chunk of money, and again, the rest of it goes to charity. We don't get any of this. So, it's all for charity.
You have to guess how many beans are in this, and then it's for charity. Obviously, it's for
more than
for
7.
the hospital. It's not about cheese. So, if anybody wants to come up and guess, put your name down, put a couple of extra wee pounds in my box, just all of them very good. It's for charity, so it's for a good cause. And then once to hear coffee, do please say good, and take all your jolly for the hospice, the NI hospice.
And it's worth pointing out that by necessity there is going to be a winner. You don't have to get it because of this. So as long as more than one person enters, you will get your money back at the very least. So, well, if you win. So, any other President's questions? Miss Campbell?
Okay.
Oh dear.
Okay. Right. Okay, I'm just thinking how do I phrase this.
Okay. It's laid on it.
Okay, forgive me if someone has already asked, because I was too busy getting milk. But what have you eaten so far today, Mr. President?
I'm trying to kill the whole I have had chili soap, cranberry juice. I had. Oh, tell you what, I did actually have something kind of interesting at around lunchtime. Hot McDonald's had their scone of the month, which was an Oreo scone. It was quite peculiar. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. Just pretty mediocre.
What colour was it?
Just scone colour.
I wasn't right.
Scone colour. I got the cheap bath. Are there any more, slightly less cliche questions, Mr. Doherty?
This is a slightly weird one.
I'm good at this one.
1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, you mentioned your love for the Divine Comedy.
Yes.
I was wondering, are they your favourite Irish band, or do you have a different one? And what are your favourite Irish bands?
Dobbin.
Yes, the Dubliners are pretty good. Yes, the Divine Comedy would be my favourite. It's a bit of a cheap answer to say that my second favourite is a band called the Worth Lewis method. Because if anybody has heard of that and knows it, you will know that the frontrunner of the Divine Comedy is also one of the 2 frontrunners of it, so that's why I like it. Otherwise, can't off the top of my head think of any more Irish bands. Typically, I just don't know where bands come from. even if you're the name of you, probably go, oh yes. But yes, the vitality is not great. Final question then from Mr. Murray.
So when are you going to get around to fixing the bit about religious polemic in the Constitution? Because I don't know how many times it's been since I asked you about that. I've heard no word about it.
I'm afraid, Mr. Murray, when you see the problem I have, I think it's fine. It's stood the test of time. It's served well for the past number of years. I'm in no hurry. There are more pressing issues to attend to, such as the issue of the tiebreaker and the general running of the society. So it may be seen to at some point, but I don't know. Right. I would now ordinarily invite our guest chair to give some opening remarks, but sadly,
I'm sorry.
It's the chair, not so much the guest part.
Bring the chair.
So in that case, I shall simply move us on to the vote on prior opinion. So, as you're all well aware of by now, this is a vote on how you're feeling with the motion right now. Later on, we'll have one on speakerability, but this is just your personal stance on the motion as of right now. So, to recap, the motion this evening is this House believes NI can have a post-sectarian election. Could all those who would like to vote in favour of the motion please raise your hand and say aye?
Aye.
Keep them up, keep them up, keep them up.
Vote allowance.
You.
Against the motion, please raise your hand and say nay. Keep up, keep up, keep up. That's high. And all those who would like to abstain on the motion, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
Keep them up, keep them up, keep them up.
Those are the line for.
Fionnbharr, fight me.
Excellent. Mr. Secretary, which side won that vote of our opinion?
22 votes.
Ooh.
In favour of the motion? No.
One. Prior.
There we go, so it'll be very interesting to see how things shift across the debate. So, without any further ado, I would very much like to welcome to open the debate this evening and to propose the motion our first speaker, Mr. Kilian Thornton.
Throwing a line just after Senator good evening, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's a pleasure to open the debate tonight and indeed the argument for the proposition. This House believes that the North of Ireland, can have a post-sectarian election. Now, I understand many of you may be sceptical around tonight's topic in light of the many issues that we face in our Assembly at the moment. Let's face it, a failing Stormont executive government, and let us remind ourselves, it's the DUP and Sinn Féin that formed the government in Stormont. These two parties have the biggest mandate for each of the sides of the community, whether that be the nationalist side for Sinn Féin and the unionist side for the DUP. Let us not forget the other political parties that are ready to get back to work a long time ago to make Stormont work. Except for Jim Mallister, who just wants to direct since the minute he was born. This failing of the Sinn Féin DUP government in itself has polarised the last election. However, if these two parties continued to show inability, inaptitude to get things moving, working and developing for the people of the North, then people will start to look past the ever-changing green and orange politics. The issues these parties are supposedly discussing, debating, trying to sort out between locked and secret doors. Talks that are putting the people of the North in very vulnerable positions.
Point.
Yep.
I'm guessing your point is here, sorry, Ilse, I'm rephrasing, is that people will see this not working and choose a more pragmatic direction. But the politics of the last year have shown, particularly with Brexit, is that people will choose blind ideology and fantastical agreements over practicality.
Yeah.
So why will not that not continue? What will make this trend of pragmatism?
Thank you, ma'am, for our question. It is something I will get on to later. It is this that I believe, and by talking to members of my own constituency, we are starting to look past sectarian politics. Why? Well, we are now in a position that people in our NHS are dying. Education cuts are putting our students at risk. And the controversial universal credit scheme is being rolled out incorrectly across Northern Ireland. Yes, the last election was incredibly nasty and polarised in Northern Ireland. But this green and orange tit for tat, orange and green politics continues, then we will continue to have this stalemate. So what is sectarianism? Well, the dictionary definition says an excessive attachment to a particular sect or party, especially in religion. The Northern Ireland definition is slightly different. It talks about the diversity of prejudicial and discriminatory attitudes, behaviours and practices between members of the two majority communities in and about Northern Ireland, who may be defined as Catholic or Protestant, Irish or British, Nationalist or Unionist, Republican or Loyalist, Green or Orange, a Paddy or a Jaffa Cave. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it is with this definition that we find ourselves in a position that unmistakably sectarianism within our society still exists. But we are making significant progress and steps towards a fairer, equal and more harmonious society. Never since the Troubles began in the 1980s, 60s, have we seen a more peaceful society than today. No, it's not perfect. Yeah.
Yes, we're certainly at peace, but we're far away from understanding. I mean, we've certainly seen that from the last election with McDonald putting forward a very progressive stance to unify SDLP and UUP, and of course they were absolutely slashed. They lost their MPs and were left with the same old. Perhaps this is something to do with fundamentally in Northern Ireland itself. And
I thank the member for his question. I do agree. And this isn't about changing fundamental ideals within either side of the community. But it's about understanding that a party that may have policies that better represent what they want, rather than just voting for them because of whatever side of the community they're on. So I'm not indicating in any way, shape or form that we should start to erode individual identities. We're trying to understand and combine those. It's not perfect. Yes, we still have people willing to protest for 3 years, every day, because they could not march past a nationalist outlying area in North Belfast. We still have so-called distant Republican terrorists who are willing to drive by police officers and shoot them at a petrol filling station in January just because they are trying to keep people safe in the north. But what I won't say to you, members of the House, and remind you, this has nothing to do about wanting a post-sectarian election now. This is in the title. This House believes that we can have the vision and achieve a post-sectarian election. I would argue that it's absolutely imperative. Imperative that we are able to do this. Leading on to a passionate topic of mine, I'm sure you can already guess, it's a Freedom Republic and a 32 Irish Republic. It is absolutely imperative, maybe on a slightly serious one, but it's absolutely imperative on my own political beliefs and values that we are able to convince, to persuade both sides of the community. It has nothing to do with the 50% plus one that Sinn Féin are talking about. We will never have a peaceful, united Ireland, whether you want it or not. Now, in the future we have some serious issues, such as Brexit. But to have a peaceful, united Ireland in any way, shape or form is about bringing everyone along. We are facing the biggest single issue since partition in this island, which is Brexit. And from somebody had mentioned, right? From somebody that lived in the most heavily militarised zone in Europe in the 1980s, South Africa, I can assure you that any introduction of a hard border along the border between the Republic and the North will be entirely detrimental. And I believe that people will start to make a shift towards a united Ireland if their economics proves better. So, forget statescraft. Usually it's about an ugly, dirty fight for dominance and nothing more. We are a democracy of sorts, but a stunned, delusional, abnormal. Let's have the belief that as the future part of this beautiful island, that we can change that mentality. Let's have the belief that one day we can have a post-sectarian election.
Thornton, apologies for that phone ringing in the background. I do hereby use my presidential powers to find about the port for very rudeness. Now to open the case for the opposition, our Treasurer, Mr. John McDonald.
Mr. President and honourable members of the House, so this is probably the only time I'm going to mention, going to quote a Labour advisor positively. Jonathan Powell, Chief British negotiator in Northern Ireland on Tony Blair, said, "Northern Ireland still suffers from its past, and it will take generations to escape sectarianism and for violence to end totally. Northern Ireland is nowhere near to being able to have a post-sectarian election." But what does this mean? It means a move on from the question of a border call. It means a move on from the Catholic versus Protestant, Unionist versus Nationalist, Irish versus British sentiment. We're defining this motion in the near to medium term future. We're not looking to pretend like we can imagine what the world might look like in 100 years' time. But tonight, please do not confuse our motives. We, the opposition, are not trying to say that we don't want a post-sectarian election. We do. But this motion is not about that. Right? No, thank you. We would actively fight for a future where the question of the pose is about whether you're on the right or on the left, what your policies are for education, healthcare, climate change, and improved living standards. Not your religion, your culture, no thank you, or your citizenship. It's not about what flag you support, but we, the opposition, are arguing that the Northern Ireland cannot realistically have a post-sectarian election anytime soon. It has been less than 2 decades since the Good Friday Agreement, yet just how many times has the executive collapsed or been boycotted by the two main parties? The proposition will have to demonstrate real growth in the movement of non-sectarian parties, but that's simply not the case. The first proposition speaker tonight said that people are starting to look beyond green and orange. But let's just have a look at the last election. There was a swing to the DUP of 10.3% in the last election, and a 4.9% swing to Sinn Féin. Every other party lost votes.
Right.
Go ahead.
That may be true, and picking up on what Jim or Mike Jim, this coherent. The last election was entirely polarised by the crocodile comments and whatnot, and it was a battle for ground because the Stormont had already collapsed at the last election. So it's inaccurate to say voting because the SDLP actually gained seats in the reduced seating number in Assembly.
I take the point, but I think the outcome of that election demonstrates how people are going to rush to support the two main parties if there's even a slight chance that something will change in the executive or in Northern Ireland politics. The two big parties, arguably the main sectarian parties, were the only parties that gained, and they gained big at the last election. SDLP lost 2.2% of the vote, and the UP lost 5.8%. Even Alliance lost. And the Greens lost, and the Greens are down to less than 1%. So we see sectarian parties not just holding more seats than ever before, but more power than ever before. And I think that's a strong signal, strong and stable signal for. It's a really strong signal to show how things are going to change. people are going to see how the DUP do stuff in Westminster, maybe not, and they're going to see how how will it really see next, probably next year when the next election is. No, thank you. Is how that's going to impact Northern Ireland, and I really think with £1.5 billion, I think it's going to be a big swing for the DUP. Unionist MPs are the only MPs sitting in seats in Westminster. That's not post-sectarian election. That's not it at all. The independent MP is a unionist, by the way. They hold the balance of power. Sinn Féin refuse to take seats, and they are fueling sectarian politics. People vote for representative elections, and people, the Republicans, are voting for a party that doesn't take seats. That's a strong signal. Post-sectarian. Sorry, yes?
Can you just clarify, do you not think the DUP fuels sectarian jihad as well?
Oh, sorry, yes, of course they do. What I'm trying to highlight is Sinn Féin voters are going back to them in droves, and they're not taking their seats. Instead of voting for SDLP, who will represent them in Westminster. But I completely agree that the DUP are worse than Sinn Féin, actually. And we really have a post-sectarian election when we see the leaders of our parties are so tied to the troubles. I'm not going to name individuals tonight, but I think we all know the leaders that some of them have been thrown into jail in the past, or have links to certain groups. I know. The Good Friday Agreement allowed them to get off scot-free. Well, I do support Good Friday Agreements, okay? But maybe that's a way for Northern Ireland to move forward. But it's not a way to heal the division when parties are no longer fighting with a bullet, but they're fighting each other with our money, with our taxes, and with our legislation. No, thank you. Fighting with our future in our hands. Maybe we have replaced the bomb with bullets, but the people are still there. I'm just going to show a picture or something. So, yeah, so let's talk about unionism and United Ireland. Do you ever think that a unionist would ever support this party? A party that says, if you really want an Irish Republic, vote for Sinn Féin. That was their poster of the last election. I'm pretty sure it was the last election as well. And that's something else. The Sinn Féin Rebellion Handbook. Yeah. Yeah, the Rebellion Handbook, guys. So in Northern Ireland, we don't have representatives forming some sort of executive. Instead, we have them arguing over a language. We have a country where the red line is culture, rather than health, jobs, tuition fees, or improving the quality of life. The issues that face ordinary working people and students every single day. So just to conclude, I would really urge you to vote against the motion tonight, and I hope this demonstrates how we are increasingly moving back to the politics of the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. I would now like to welcome our second speaker for the proposition, Mr. Fionnbharr Rodgers, HLN. Ciaran, Ciaran Campbell.
Hello there. One second. Almost there. Oh, jeez, that's a long one. Girl, love it. Come on, yeah. And in Ulster Scots, Ciaran's her galley okay. Firstly, on the point of John from Powell, he was speaking in Queen's recently, and he said something very similar to your quote. Northern Ireland was drowning in history. And I made the point to him, which I will then do you, that is not necessarily a negative thing, because the history of the past 90 years is far and away the exception to the history of the last 4 centuries. The question should at least be pondered tonight, that when we ask, say that Northern Ireland will have a post-sectarian election, which century do we think it will have one in? Because more and more it is looking less likely to be this one that we're in. And eventually, though, society as we know it and understand it is going to collapse, fall down the curtain and join the marching band visible. And the current sort of parties are very unlikely to survive that, all except for Jim Allister, who does seem to be the most likely MLA to survive a nuclear apocalypse. Out of sheer spite alone. Him presiding over some sort of synod of cockroaches. Largely because he already leads a party of cocks. That was the political dynamic I mentioned. I assume you've waved that way?
Yes.
Thank you very much, that's all I did here. Moving on, back again. Thank you. But what we need to remember with Northern Ireland is it's coming from a context of 30 years of a dirty little war, followed by 20 years of stagnation. That's 50 years which has entrenched, forced and entrenched this sort of tribal politics that we see today. Which is a setting which is ripe for exploitation by unscrupulous little bigots of varying localities. And difficult to get over that, but not impossible. That tribalism, which did exist before, but only on the unwashed fringes of society, by no means the mainstream. The 50 years behind that show the birth of Northern Ireland sort of established as effectively a sort of bourgeois apartheid, a very British apartheid. And if you don't believe me on that, then just look at the transport map of Northern Ireland, which mirrors pretty much exactly the political map. Whereas, if you consider before partition, you were never more than 5 miles away from a train station in Ireland. Nowadays, all train stations in the north are safely and securely in the Unionist Protestant heartlands, all apart from 2, which would be very difficult, disastrous to get rid of. And in fact, they did try to get rid of Derry Station, and they were successful in getting rid of. Newry used to have 3 train stations. Now it has none. The only line to Dublin is in Bestford, which is called Newry. This is Belfast Central Station. Is way at the arse end of the city. Just let me rant personally for a moment. Trying to get out of Newry Station at night, or Bestford Station at night, gives my arse a headache. We also have to be careful as well not to conflate institutional politics with the political class with civil society in Northern Ireland. Because the Shinners in the DUP are backstreet drivers. They're the architect of that. They're the people who say, oh look, there go my people. I must find out where they're going so I can lead them. But the Shinners do that slightly better, as McDonald did say. Because nationalists have always made that politicians going right back to the day of Daniel O'Connell. Just jammy bastards.
You're really hard for me not to find you.
You don't know his parents are married. In Northern Ireland, and bear with me because what I'm about to say has a slight double meaning, and the other meaning is slightly dodgy. But in Northern Ireland, there is a great and storied tradition of people taking matters into their own hands. But I mean that in the legal sense, rather than the kneecapping sense. From Betty Williams and Murray Corrigan of the Peace People, through the foundation of Glen Cree and Corrie Meelan, Centres for Peace, and then most recently, we have art language classes that are started up by Linda Irvine, sister-in-law of David. She takes buses of people from East Belfast, from Falls to shop. No. From East Belfast, from Falls to Learn Irish, which has been hugely successful. She expected about 10 people to sign up, she ended up with a few hundred. And then, the only problem that exists in Northern Ireland is the same that we find global in many other countries. Just it has its own sort of unique colouring here, in 2 colours of green and orange, and a little bit of blue in them. And that is of a disillusioned and disenfranchised electorate who would rather emigrate and remove themselves in whatever way, whether that's physically or spiritually, than get involved in the political climate. Basically, sensible people who are put off by a nonsensical system. However, we still see a spirit, as was said by Mr. Neil, his point of information. I might need a little bit more time to bear with me. We are at peace, but reconciliation, those are two we should talk about in partnership. Reconciliation has been minimal. So reconciliation, it's certainly at least been non-existent at the institutional level, but on the ground, we can see it happening. And all it takes is for someone to light the fire among the electorate. so that they will then hold that fire to the arses of their elected representatives and hold them morally accountable. And we've already seen the chinks in Sinn Féin and the DUP's respective armours breaking, whether that's the DUP in East Belfast, with Alliance, the Sinn Féin in West Belfast, the People for Profit, or the leaking smatterings of possible Ulster Unionist reconnaissance, which have happened every so often, such as in Southampton a couple of years ago, but definitely dead. Probably be another Unionist party eventually. So it's clear that that bubble, which the DUP and Sinn Féin keep their respective communities in, is not immune to bursting. A week is a long time. I heard it the first time, man. I'm doing the best I can. A week is a long time in politics, and I'm reasonably confident that the current impasse may have another decade of life assuredly left within it, but I think 2 decades is a little bit of a push. So I'd say good night, and God cool.
Very much, Mr. Rodgers, or Miss Campbell, whatever you're going by these days. I would now like to welcome to continue the case. Yes, for the opposition, Mr. Ciaran Gallagher, HLR.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the House. I'm not on this side of the House because I want to be, but because I have pretty much resigned to the idea after taking part in politics on this campus in this city and been abroad for quite a number of years that this is not just student politics. Very, very not an obstacle for me. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I've come to this conclusion because I think, sadly, it is the case. I've been researching this for a few days now, and it's been very frustrating to read, and it's been very depressing on my psyche, and frankly, I hope it shows. Because it's a very nasty conclusion to come to. No one, I'm sure, in this room does want to, but if we're being realistic about it, I think we must. Go on.
As you just said, Claire Bailey would not be elected if it weren't for you. Are you not the archetypal example of what I was just saying? Young electorate engaging themselves in changes of the political sphere.
Okay.
Micro level rather than a macro.
You're assuming, though, that the type of change only goes in one way, in one direction, that is to say. I think there are certainly, it sounds like you are. The trends towards non-sectarianism, the trends towards, as we say, other parties here, as opposed to nationalism and unionism, was on the rise. And look how quickly that changed. In the space of 2 years, we went from, in fact, not even just in 2 years, we went for example, unionism falling below the 50% threshold for the first time in the history of Northern Irish state, to being by far the majority in the next election less than a year later. It's a different election, obviously, but you see the point I'm trying to make. Nationalism, whether it's British or Irish, comes back with a vengeance because it speaks to a very low, but nevertheless very real part of the human psyche. We all know there's very few people truly rise above a sense of patriotism deep down in their hearts somewhere. Anyway, and even if they manage to do it at home, it only takes a trip abroad before it comes back. In any case, to press on. The other problem is sectarianism will probably continue to exist, especially whilst there is a local parliament or an assembly here, because that is the struggle, that is how the struggle that has been defined for those seats for a long time. Now, I'm also coming around to the idea that perhaps direct rule for a time being mightn't be such a terrible idea, though. Yes, thank you for saying so. I think it is a dreadful thing. But I also strongly believe now more than ever, the appetite for self-determination and autonomy has never been stronger. And in an agreed way for a weird change between nationalists and unionists. But once we have direct rule, it will be seen as inadequate representation, and rightly so. Direct rule has had many years trialled in this country and has failed not just to eliminate sectarianism, but also to eliminate a whole host of problems under its tenure, mostly social ones. And apart from that, it will also, of course, naturally irritate the passive Republican psyche. For many cultural and practical reasons, we've just talked about Republicanism there, many cultural or practical reasons, people are convinced that inflation systems on this island would be a good thing, but the perpetual idea of unification leaves loyalists externally spooked and anxious about that possible inevitability. So the only thing I think that could ever eliminate it, if you really want to press me for an idea on this, is the unification of Ireland in one of two ways: either under an independent Irish jurisdiction or a united Ireland back under British rule. Yes?
I would like to propose resetting the political institutions of Ireland to 1783 under the tagline, "Make Ireland Grattan again."
There's a whole host of ways it can happen, and I think it's very, very interesting debate which doesn't happen often enough. But anyway, I'll give you another recent example we've had, where we had a very, very good reason not to divide on sectarian lines. Brexit. We had the chance to align on this very, very crucial new British Parliament. We have less than 5 years, less than the lifetime of a government, to actually decide what will be the fate, not just of the UK, but more crucially for at least us here. What will happen here? What will the relationship be, for example, with the rest of this island? Why go on? Yeah.
I think the opposition is completely misunderstood tonight's topic. We are not looking, as I said during my speech, to have or indicate that there's going to be a post-sectarian election now, or 5 years, or 10 years, but to have the belief that one day, whether it be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 50 years' time, that we can overcome those hurdles and we are able to have a post-sectarian election.
Right. And, well, again, there's a problem here. How much time do we think that will take? Because eventually, this has to be a medium-term discussion. Long-term, anything could happen. We could be under neither British or Irish rule in 100 years because the world is so volatile and the power is shifting away from Europe, away from the West, slowly but surely, both economically and in terms of actual military influence. In any case, going back to what was my point, yes, we had an aspect here where we could say there are reasons to come together on this, both unionist and nationalist, regardless of what it is. And what happened? The one union, done.
So you give 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Right. Never mind. In that case, I'll tell you what. Basically, I'll leave it to this gentleman. Sorry to rattle on. To find this, I think the proposition has to do this, basically, to win the argument as far as we ought to be concerned. That Northern Ireland will reach a point where the discussion over whether people are Catholic and Protestant is eliminated, but also that the arguments for nationalism and unionism on a rational basis rather than a cultural and emotional one vastly outweigh the latter. I don't think that, frankly, is possible given the nature of patriotism and nationalism. I wish it were so, but frankly, I don't think the history of the world suggests that it will be. Once they reach that scenario, they may have a ghost to the point, but until then, they don't. I'm very sorry, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Gallagher. Sorry for having to bit short there. Just before we go on, Mr. Doherty, is anybody else feeling the heat? Anyone on the window open?
Yes.
General nod of approval.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, then I would very much like to welcome our final speaker for the trouble this evening, Mr. Edmund Doherty.
Before I begin, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to my father for actually explaining to me what the Health Sectarianism actually is. I'd like to start off with a few rebuttals of points made by the opposition, starting off with that of the first opposition speaker, Mr. McDonald. He mentioned the idea that it will take generations, from this quote, to escape sectarianism. I would actually argue that we have had a change, or enough changes, to last several generations in a very short amount of time. By next year, look at how much the world will have changed compared to what it looked like in 1998. We have a lot more Wi-Fi. We have honey monster, sugar honey monster in the White House. And who the hell knows who the Prime Minister is going to be? Alongside this, also the idea that it is not going to be possible for this post-sectarian election to occur. That's what people said about Brexit, the 2015 election, 2017 election, the election of Donald Trump, the French election, I keep going on. So the idea that it isn't possible has been stated about many things before that then happened. Also the idea that this is a party issue, especially in regards to the 2017 general election. In my opinion, this was an election influenced by very recent events, largely caused by the fact that it was a snap election, which blatantly disregarded the terms of the fixed term parliament Act created Dobbin.
If snap elections really helped the main two parties, then what happened in the Conservative Party at the last election?
Time snap point. I'll get on to that later. Alongside that, the idea of the Unionists holding more power within the British Parliament. In my opinion, this is a non-sectarian entity because it has a lot of parties within it, 8 or 9. And the idea of sectarian society is based on a particular set of steps. You only have a few certain ideals. In the British Parliament, there are many, and they are very diverse. Now to move on to Mr. Gallagher, before I can actually get to my own part of the speech, I'm going to mention one point in the amount of time, otherwise. He mentioned the idea of comparison between Stormont and Westminster. However, these are very different. For example, they use different voting systems. In our Grateful Westminster, in the Grateful Westminster, which I happily have never had the pleasure of visiting, because I am British at the end of the day, we use the first past the post system. One person, one vote. Whereas in Stormont, or seating Stormont, they use single transferable vote. And as someone that has studied A-level politics, I know that it's the most confusing system you could ever have to use.
On that point, you still have to admit that it's a fair system. It produces a proportional result.
It may produce a proportional result, but it is so confusing that I don't think most people understand it. And a good example of why these systems are different and why that causes issues is that people who normally support the DUP in South Down vote for the social, the LP, sometimes called for it. Those people vote no, you just vote for them, stop Sinn Féin getting any seats. Moving on to my own point, I'm going to back up a point made by my previous speakers for the proposition. This idea that the most important thing we need is better representation. This is what will bring a post-sectarian election to this country. I know this because in my own constituency in England, it is the issue of representation that led to my constituency becoming a rubbish Brexit supporting Tory seat in the middle of a red sea of Labour.
On that point,
Yes.
how is that my vote?
because it's all through better representation. And the reason why the Conservative candidate won was because she actually bothered to turn up and go and campaign. What we need is for the parties outside of the main two, and we also need the two main parties to focus on a wider range of issues. The problem is right now they are stuck in this idea that all that matters is unionism and nationalism. As was mentioned by Mr. Rodgers, there is a difference between institutional politics and civic society. And as Mr. Thornton mentioned, due to this inability of these two main parties, other issues have become more important and will continue to become more important. If we have better representation and better leadership, maybe we won't end up with what Frankie Ball described as the political wing of the Old Testament. Maybe we'll actually have good parties. This is why I say that we can have a post-sectarian election, because what we need is for people to actually focus on issues that matter. The people...
Okay, so the issues that matter. NI was founded, especially, in fact specifically, along sectarian lines. That is why it's permeated throughout. It's kind of a spurious comparison to say that, well, this may work in England, therefore it may work here. These are entirely different atmospheres and vectors. Nationalism and unionism here, especially, remain important politics. To say that they're not is to completely ignore our history.
I do agree, they are very important policies, but are they as important as, say, the NHS, as we mentioned by Mr. Thornton? These issues, I believe, show that that's what is needed, representation. And I have an example of where Northern Ireland did vote on something that was clearly not based on sectarianism. The EU referendum of June 23rd, 2016. Now, the Remain vote for Northern Ireland was 55.8%. Surely that must mean that it wasn't just every single person that was a nationalist voted for it. So, therefore, that must mean that unionists voted for it as well. Clearly stating that this is something from post-sectarianism because it was based around a wider array of issues.
On that point,
all we need to do now is turn that idea into our main elections, and we will have a post-sectarian election without any violence or without any massive political change. Better representation and a more engaged electorate. Thank you.
Sorry, and now to close the debate for this evening, our final speaker for the opposition, Mr. Hugh Doherty.
We are both Irishmen, and that is what matters. What I have just told you is words spoken by Edward Carson, notable unionist, to one Tom Kettle, a notable nationalist of the same period. Upon a first reading of this quote, it may speak to us thinking of the triviality of what sectarianism and the division of identities mean. But as we look further into it, I believe this quote stands for both a sad and a cruel reminder of what the status of Northern Ireland is. That if we perhaps share the same national identity, at our core being British or Irish, or civic identities or geographical where we come from, that it does not matter. Because at the end of the day, Northern Ireland has one pervading question, which it was set up around, its nation, its people and its institutions, that stops there from being a post-sectarian election. Now, or for as long as that Northern Ireland, as we perceive it, will continue to exist. I'm going to begin by cutting down some of what was spewed by the proposition today. Firstly, the idea that polarisation will stop continuing. And I'd like to ask why. Because we've already seen on our side of the House plenty of empirical evidence that this is not the case. That support for the ending of this polarisation comes in peaks and troughs. And that as nationalism can make a swing forwards, so can unionism. And that this is a back and forth between 2 points to which there is no visible end. And we heard nothing from this side that suggests in any meaningful way that it is perceivable based on evidence that in the near future, or as has been said, in more medium or somewhat distant future, this is possible. I'll take your point. Kilian.
I think it's absolutely ludicrous to say that elections in the future is only going to be between the two main parties. The SDLP, the UUP, we've already seen an opportunity to try and make post-sectarian elections last year. It didn't work very well for those unions because we're not ready right now. But in the future, I do believe that we can. If we have that centre ground parties, where, such as the SDLP does, a national party that wants to make Northern Ireland work for everyone, as inclusive of all sides of the community. So it's not just about this polarisation of people switching from DUP to Sinn Féin. We do have them central ground parties that will work for everyone.
Okay. So, the idea is that if you're not Sinn Féin or you're not DUP, that you're not sectarian. This is something that has been briefly touched upon by my side of the House, but that's a presumption that we need to end right here and now. Simply not being Sinn Féin and not being DUP does not make you anti-sectarian. You can be with the SDLP, you can be with the UUP, and they themselves essentially hold a stance on this issue. They themselves as either a Republican or a Unionist party, which, even though they praise themselves as being the centre ground, will still be the main feature of all of their campaigns, what they represent. And even then, we need to think about the wider issue of what Northern Ireland's status means. This is something I'll be getting onto later in my speech when I talk about Northern Ireland's institutional status. What I mean to say is that the case made by the proposition so far is that if we stop the support for Sinn Féin, or we stop the support for DUP, that we stop sectarianism. We need to recognise that there are cultural attitudes deeply rooted within people, within communities, within whether it's electoral boundaries, if it's in activities and industries available there, whether it's the hurt felt by communities, that sectarianism runs much deeper than the Shinners, or whatever you call DUP supporters. So, the point is that these do not exist only to oppose that dichotomy. And regarding the one issue, the one big issue, that of the status of Northern Ireland as being in the UK, as being part of a united Ireland, or being some other as of yet undecided status for it. Maybe you've heard of some nightmarish European superstate conglomerate. Yeah. Okay. So, I now need to move on to my first substantive point, and one of the biggest points that has been bandied around by both sides tonight. That of Northern Ireland's institutions, and chiefly the Good Friday Agreement. Now, everyone here believes, or we were at least taught to believe, that the Good Friday Agreement is a nice wee piece of paper. But we need to look deeper and think about what it actually means. And what the Good Friday Agreement enshrines is sectarianism at every level of society. And this is not something which has been properly addressed by the proposition side.
On that point.
Yes.
Surely if you look into the Good Friday Agreement, its core values are clear, like democracy, human rights, the cross-community aspect, and it's only whenever you look into the details is sectarianism entrenched. So really, should the issue not be to scrap the Good Friday? It's not really an issue of scrapping the Good Friday Agreement completely and start from scratch. It's more an issue of looking at the Good Friday Agreement and tweaking it so it's more in line with its own core values.
I take your point, but I would ask, to what degree do you wish to tweak the Good Friday Agreement? And if we're to scrap it, if that's even a relevant concept for this debate. When we look at the Good Friday Agreement, it has power sharing that has to be between the largest unionist and the largest nationalist parties. This means that Parliament and the Assembly in Northern Ireland has to be between those who are diametrically opposed to each other. Whether that's Sinn Féin or the DUP or the SDLP and the UUP, that is a sectarian make-up at the highest level of government. No. And so, I pose to you all the question that if we were... This is the point which is going to go to the looking forward, if this is supposed to be a long-term solution. If we were to pose this same question in 1930, or shortly after partition, if we were to say, can Northern Ireland have a post-sectarian election? The clear answer is no, because things were construed in such an unfair way that that's not possible. The same way now we are to say that if the Good Friday Agreement is significantly tweaked enough, that there is no longer sectarianism at the deepest and most institutional levels of Northern Ireland, then we are no longer dealing with Northern Ireland as we perceive it. And that's not a useful comparative to make, because we wouldn't be dealing with the same nation. that we currently understand. And this is why the ideals in the population cannot change. Because you're always going to be voting for your largest unionist or your largest nationalist. And as Edmund said, if we should focus on bigger issues, this is the one big issue. I commonly ask people, what is the one shared cultural marker of Northern Ireland? Beyond something trivial, be that a food or a football team, there isn't one. There is no common value, no common historical figure, no common anthem or flag to which we all feel ourselves beholden as a common symbol of nationhood. For that reason, Northern Ireland is deeply divided on every level. Non-sectarianism is not possible in the sad state of a nation we have. And therefore, I encourage everyone sitting here today to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobbin, and thank you indeed to all of our speakers. Before we get on with time to this, I shall now move the House to questions. So, quite simply, oh yes, I should also note that Mr. Dunn has had to leave early this evening on... Pardon? You don't know. No, it's not hard to say so. He regrets not being able to stay the entire time. But it also does technically mean that the most senior member of the society who's not currently doing something else is Mr. Ryan Neal. Would you like to sit in the Secretary's chair? You can have a count at the end. Thank you very much. So, yes, I now move to questions. Mr. Nairn, hello. Round of applause, Mr. Nairn.
Very good. I give you our guest chair.
Yes! You're alliance! What? So anyway, all these are going straight over your head. So, does anybody have any questions for the proposition this evening? Yes, Miss Banner.
I'll try and phrase this in a way that makes sense. So, considering that the nationalist community is growing faster than the unionist community, and that there's a general trend within the unionist community that young people are kind of getting educated and then getting out of this disaster of a country. What would you say to the idea that whilst given enough time, we may be able to reach a non-sectarian election, we're more likely to reach the point at which we're going to have a united Ireland first. So Northern Ireland won't exist to have a non-sectarian election in, if that makes sense.
I think it's funny. That was, in fact, one of the ideas that we touched upon whenever coming up with this motion. So thank you very much for mentioning it now. Mr. Thornton.
Obviously, United Ireland is a passionate topic of mine, I think I'll answer. Then we're diving into a different debate of a United Ireland under what context. I believe a United Ireland needs to be debated out and figured out. Sinn Féin hasn't got a clue on what their United Ireland is going to be. CLP, admittedly, haven't got a clue either. Fianna Gael, Fianna Fáil don't have much of an idea either. I would put forward that United Ireland under a federalised state where we still have the northern part and we still have your office, but it's too much of a wishy-washy, or not wishy-washy question, but wishy-washy kind of response for me to give, because none of us in this room know what type of United Ireland we're going to have.
Sorry, point of
so therefore, no, you can't do that.
Okay, sorry. Alright, no more.
So therefore, there's no opportunity for me to sort of clarify that. And nobody, I don't think anybody is going to clarify that. Because a United Ireland and the idea that everybody thinks a United Ireland is going to exist, that all of a sudden Northern Ireland is going to be incorporated directly into the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is going to have to foot the bill for Northern Ireland and pay all this debt up. It's a very complicated issue that we need to discuss, and all political parties need to discuss, never mind that Literific need to discuss. So.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Will anyone from the opposition to respond, Mr. McDonald?
Just taking your question as a hypothetical, if we did come to a position where we had a United Ireland because of the majority of nationalists, I still don't think we'd have a peaceful Northern Ireland. I think unionists would come across and be like, what the hell is going on with our country? They'd probably move back. No, they wouldn't. Who would want to come back here? But no, they would up in arms because no union is going to be under a flag of the tricolour. I'm just saying.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Did I hear Mr. Dr. Miller's words coming right there? Sounds eerily familiar. Does anybody have any questions for the opposition? Ms. Dobbin.
So it's been really interesting hearing both sides because like I'm from the US and like I don't really know a lot about it. I tried learning on the internet, but I think it's very different here for people, you know, who actually live it. And it's really interesting hearing the lack of sort of hopelessness on the opposition side because like in the US, even though you know like there's a lot of really bad stuff going on, various racism, sexism, homophobia. Trump who's trying to destroy Obamacare, our education system. We're still hopeful that, you know, we're the generation that can like change things. And, you know, I've gotten the pleasure to know you all and I've figured out, you know, who's a unionist and who's a nationalist in here. It's pretty easy to tell.
I'm a unionist.
But, you know, you guys...
I'm an alliance voter.
But you guys don't like hate each other. You know, you guys will like still work together, still build a society together, still talk together. You know, still do stuff together. So I guess my question for the opposition is like, why are you so like hopeless? Because like you seem to make a lot of progress.
Okay. To quote Mr. Alex Kane, some of you will know him, he spoke on a similar debate about 2 years ago in this very house. He says, yes, things are far better than they were, but, and I quote, they are still highly crap. And to the point he said, I desperately hope that my children move away. That's what his words. Things are definitely better, but it's easy to think, particularly in... I have many nationalist friends and unionist friends and people who couldn't care less. And we all get on very well, especially in the university context. But I can tell you just 2 years ago, when the Sinn Féin youth brought up a potential referendum to amend the student union's views on this, things got very nasty. I got a lot of emails in my inbox and hooded figures coming into the student council. This is not a joke. This still happens. And even in a university where people are more enlightened than, and I'm going to be very harsh here, more enlightened than the rest of the population, most likely. Well, what else is the point of university? And again, we deal. I think it's something that the proposition don't have any real cases to put because it's all very speculation. And optimism is pleasant, but it doesn't make it true. I had to defend myself in the physical sense when I was chatting to a woman in the speakeasy bar who's younger than me. Her brother objected to me talking to her because he thought I was English. This is the youth. This is the hope. This is the generation we hope are going to overturn this. It's not close here. We are not even there with the young population yet. What hope have we at all if the youth aren't even engaged in this?
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Sir Rodgers, just one prop there?
Well, the US context is actually quite a good analogy because the US and Northern Ireland are quite similar. They both have the same level of hyper-partisanship. The only difference is Northern Ireland has a valid excuse. I would disagree, but there is the fact that young people, obviously being raised by their parents, do share the same views to an extent. However, as has been numerous articles out recently, that a lot of young Protestants are far more liberal than their parents, and certainly far more liberal than the DUP, which would not be hard. Earlier, somewhere around the time of the last election, the last sort of 6 million elections we've had this year, described the DUP manifesto as the Old Testament of fortnightly event elections. It's the second part that came to. So, again, though that is very prevalent, that's what the sectarian election within people here.
Can we get first aid over there?
What am I doing wrong? Though that does undoubtedly exist, it is the exception, it is not the rule. And one thing is, if you look at it's largely the lack of opportunities. You mentioned people at university being more enlightened. One main problem is a lot of people don't have the chance to go to university. And obviously, if you look at the bonfire builders and plague protesters, they're all like the same age as a lot of people in this room. The only difference is they don't have the degrees or the A levels or the opposable funds. If you look at those bonfires, it is undeniable that is quite an impressive feat of engineering. Those people used to be in the shipyards. The problem is the shipyards aren't there anymore. They basically just need leadership to put them in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Rodgers. That's where we're going. I'd like to point out just the year 20, Mr. Gallagher, about the fellow who accosted you in the bar, thinking you're English. I presume it would involve your accent, was it?
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to point out as well that we've spoken a great deal about how people at Queen's are a lot more enlightened than the general populace. I have been to university for about 4 years now. I've known Mr. Gallagher for about 3 years, and I've known many other enlightened people, and not one of us has had any clue what on earth his accent is. It could be anything. We just have no idea. So one day we'll figure out, but don't you tell me, it's all part of the other. So, does anyone have any abstaining points on the motion? You look really eager, Mr. Moore, so go ahead.
Alright, so in the Republic of Ireland, they have a mechanism called the Citizens' Assembly, and basically how it works is they use it to hash out consensus on controversial constitutional issues that are going to be put to a referendum. And so the way it works is they get a polling company, and the polling company selects 100 citizens, balanced according to the demographic makeup of Ireland. So there will be 50 men and 50 women, there will be a certain number of LGBT people, there will be a certain number of ethnic minorities, things like that, right? And basically they'll put the Citizens' Assembly together, and they'll have an impartial chair, and they will work out basically agreements on certain issues. And then, whenever they work that out, then it is put to referendum. And basically, I've heard. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a guy called Peter Osborne. He's involved in some in civil society. I can't remember. Huh?
The Green Dobbin?
No. Peter Osborne. No. I don't know what that was about, right? But anyway, right? So basically, he is involved in an organisation, and they do like things about transparency and improving democracy and things like that. And he basically is really into this idea. And basically, he says that we could use a Citizens' Assembly here in Northern Ireland for hashing out consensus on things like legacy issues, about the border question, about basically contentious issues. Maybe not about abortion and marriage equality. That might be a bit of a grey area for it to deal with, but. Basically, what I would ask both of the teams here this evening is basically, what would you think of a Citizens' Assembly or a revived civic forum as a means to take contentious issues out of the hands of politicians, out of the hands of the spectator sport that is storming, and put it into the hands of ordinary members of the public, because there is such disillusionment with MLAs and with the parties that storm it. And I think really what people need is they need a chance to see people like them who are like them speaking up for what they want to hear and what they want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask the proposition to respond first. Mr. Thornton.
I'd like to know this first question. I'd like to remind I'm very heavily involved in politics. I was at the Fionnbharr election or the Fine Gael election tomorrow. I'd like to remind the member that the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly goes back to the Dáil Committee, of which they will then decide upon. It is nothing legally binding on the Citizens' Assembly that will enforce or change legislation within the Republic of Ireland. I would also remind the member that the Republic of Ireland has a constitution. Northern Ireland does not have a constitution, written constitution, but has a constitution under UK legislation. And therefore we are delving into questions that our politicians can't even decide. Not in the Republic that our politicians can't decide, but that they just want a second opinion. So if our politicians up in the North can't even come to a conclusion or debate about or agree within the chamber of the Assembly, they're then going to set up a citizens' assembly to get the opinion of the people, report back to the Assembly, and still not be able to decide. So having a citizens' assembly is a great idea. I do support it in the Republic of Ireland. But first of all, we need to get our institution back up in the North before we can start making movements towards a citizens' assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Anybody from the opposition care to respond? Mr. Dobbin?
Yeah, I'll firstly make the point that the Citizens' Assembly is the instrument of a republic, and constitutionally is not as useful a mechanism for the constitutional arrangements under a kingdom, is firstly, but also that I don't believe that the setting up of the Citizens' Assembly has anything that different to the ideas that we proposed here. What the opposition's case tonight was that both with people and with politicians themselves, and in all cases of wider society, that the evidence we've been presented and the institutions available to these people, that when it comes time for an election, that it will be voted on sectarian grounds, and that the evidence at all levels suggests that this will continue. So perhaps it's useful to have a platform where, in like a citizens' assembly, those sorts of issues are hashed out. But I don't think it changes the answer that we present to the central question of the debate today.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbin. We shall go for just one more round of questions. I do so very much hate having to tell people to be brief, but I very much will this time. So please keep your questions and your answers brief, ladies and gentlemen, so that we might get to the bottom. Question for proposition. Good sir, back there.
This is my first ever question, by the way, but I was going to ask the proposition. They say that voting on sectarian grounds will continue, or mixed up, so I think I mixed something up badly here, but yeah, voting on sectarian grounds, people vote for a party based on their prejudice and their background. But say you're from a nationalist background, you adamantly believe in everything in Sinn Féin's manifesto, or if you're from a unionist background, you are an Old Testament Bible bashing Republican sort. What is saying that you're voting sectarianly but you're not voting for what you believe in? So the link the two inextricably is just wrong.
Interesting question. It's
what's your name?
Mr. Fionnbharr, Rodgers, to respond. Say it again. Try and summarise.
My question?
Yes.
Just because you vote for Sinn Féin if you're from a nationalist background, just because you vote for the DUP if you're from a unionist background, does not make you sectarian. It simply means, it doesn't make you sectarian, it means you could believe in their manifesto and their promises.
Yes, no, of course. No, there's all sorts of reasons why people would vote for whatever party they vote for. Even DP voters voting for the SLP, or people in North Belfast voting for the DUP because Sinn Féin is the only other option and they just want an MP. I'm going to use this time because it is vaguely relevant, and if I don't, I'm going to explain. You've heard some facts at Mr. Dobbin. You don't hold me hostage. There are also facts at Mr. Dobbin because his speech seemed to be buoyant. Very well spoken. Very well said. You mentioned Edward Carson and Tom Kettle, so that is and door for me to mention Sir James Craig and Captain Willie Redmond. In the middle on the stage section of the Irish News, which is on the Phoenix, finding an article from 100 years before on that day.
Finish your point, please, Mr. Rodgers.
There's an article on the comments on House, the debate on House Commons after the death of Willie Redmond in the song, where Craig referred to Redmond as my fellow countryman. Said, though I disagree with him politically, I always respected him as a person with his character. But the main point is my fellow countryman. The sectarianism, the tribalism that exists today did not exist from 1921 to 1968, 71. Which is true, like if you look at those years, there was no one nationalist party that, held the entire national struggle with Sinn Féin does today. In fact, the nationalists split between sort of multi-coloured rainbow, including the Labour Party.
Thanks, 2 minutes. Thank you for your point on that. Basically, Rodgers, please take your seat. Mr. McDonald, first one.
I'll be very, very brief. So sectarianism, by definition, is not just religion, it's also by party. And just these are the people that Sinn Féin are trying to get. If you really want an Irish Republic, vote for Sinn Féin. The DUP are just beside it.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. That was 15 seconds. You deserve an award. Are there any kind of questions for the opposition?
Oh, I have an abstaining question.
Is there anyone there for that? Good sir, you want for the opposition?
Does the opposition believe that if we change or attempt to change the fundamentals of our society in Northern Ireland, e.g. education, that it would make any sort of a difference to like changing the sectarian landscape we have? Because just the sort of schools that just exist, predominantly most Catholics would be a Catholic school, and then most Protestants would be a public school. They don't tend to mix as much. Do you think that would change anything?
Thank you, good sir.
Ryan.
Who from the opposition care to respond? Gallagher?
I'll give this a shot. It might. But there's a problem here because, for example, if you were to get rid of segregated education, if you stopped slotting upwards of 90% of children into Protestant schools and into Catholic schools, you may actually start to see some real movement. However, in fact, you would see some interesting results, I'm sure, from the very off. And some experiments have been done on this, and it has tended to work. But there's a problem here as much with geography as anything else. For example, if you are going to force schools to be 50-50 along, say, Catholic Protestant lines or from Catholic Unionist nationalist backgrounds, things like that, it's easy enough in the city, but it's much, much more difficult to do it in rural parts where communities are built around these single things.
Yeah.
It's one of the main arguments from rural voters against it, who would otherwise be for it. I'm not driving my child 15 miles just so he can be in a mixed school, which would unfortunately be the reality. It would take years, if not decades, of infrastructure changes to make that a national possibility. So unfortunately, again, we're talking very long term.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Would anybody from the building
Mr.
Doherty, to respond?
Yes, thank you for bringing up this idea of institutional change, especially in education, because I've actually studied this. There is actually an idea that's been brought forward in recent years about this integration into education, the creation of integrated schools, and it's where basically every person in their background is accepted, and it doesn't matter what religion or whatever. And so what that means is everyone can come together and actually maybe get on a bit better. When they've done polls on the students, it's always been shown that the kids that go to these schools always feel more connected with each other. They don't feel as segregated against each other, and they feel a stronger sense of community. In regards to the cost of it, and especially not in cities, I forget the name of the town, I believe it's in County Fionnbharr. They proposed an idea where instead of having all these very small different schools for all the different ones, they would build, in the centre, just outside the centre of the city, one massive school that everyone could go to that had areas for everyone, and that it meant that every child could be integrated into society as a whole. And ultimately, if that occurs, that will hopefully see the end of sectarianism, especially for future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. And our final point for this evening, does anyone have an abstain point on the motion? Ms. Bellis, please try to answer the question.
As an American who doesn't really know a lot about this issue, what would you like me to know?
You're not listening to them?
Mr. Dobbin, can you hang on up?
Yeah. I've had enough of this country.
Is there any other?
Who from the opposition would like to give his...
Is there any other standing points? Because that's just asking to reiterate what we decided. We should remove that question or something.
I'll give us.
Let's give it a shot.
In the absence of anything better or more succinct, in one word, history. I know that sounds like a cheap point. It's
No, like I know
genuine,
that,
yeah.
like I've read on that, but I mean like what personally have you experienced, like prejudice-wise, discrimination, like what is something that you experienced and like you want me to know? And I mean this not from like an historical point, like you may read a book, but I mean like emotionally speaking.
Asking people to share.
Okay, I'll give you an example. And this will answer your question from earlier. I was born in England. To me, when I was a child, Ireland meant two things to me. One, seeing Grandma and Grandpa, and an extremely long drive to the Decking Ferry. Then when I came here, obviously I wasn't aware that there was a north-south divide. It took me, and it's still ongoing, it has taken me years to sort of resolve to myself what exactly is my identity. Up until I was in my mid-teens, I still considered myself English and British. I now consider myself Irish as well as Northern Irish, as well as English to an extent, and then by proxy British as well. It's very, very muddled. And whilst trying to strain for peace and for some sort of fraternity between these two in the middle of this dichotomy, it's so complicated, and for much of the time it seems needlessly so. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's actually something I was like a personal.
I'll quit there.
Mr. Thornton to give us our final response of the evening.
Thank you, Madam, for a question. I think when we're talking about a post-sectarian society, and we've heard, and I'll ask you a question if you don't mind responding. Did you understand the north-south divide of Ireland before you came here?
Not really. I mean, I like read a little bit on like Wikipedia. Like I understood it from a historical standpoint, but not from like an emotional standpoint.
I have travelled in Europe 2 times, and talking to Europeans, talking to Americans, and describing that I live in the UK, but I am Irish. Because when they initially ask you, oh, you know, where are you from? I'm from Ireland. And then, you know, you say, well, Park, and you're like, oh, so you live in is that the UK? Yeah. Most people have no idea that there's a split in this one. So I believe, from my personal opinion, that if we move towards post-sectarian elections, we are in a more harmonious and more peaceful society. Because therefore people are not, at the minute people are over conflict between their national identity, their religion, but if we move towards post-sectarian elections, then therefore they are not concentrated on those issues. They are concentrated on real political issues. But their politicians, their local politician, whether it be their local councillor, their MLA, whoever is best representing them in their policies, in their party, then therefore we'll have a more peaceful society. And hopefully lead to a 32 Irish Republic.
Here. A lovely vote of end you're receiving today. If all those members in attendance could please get their membership cards at the ready.
Oh, I forgot again.
I know you're a member of Belfast. Please stop for the other. Yes, I shall move the but don't forget, we are adjourned to woodworkers again this evening, I believe.
Yeah, the match.
Wow. Mr. O'Neill is not here, so I'm afraid I'm not aware of any other plans. Pardon? Yeah, I know you're a member. Mr. O'Neill, do we have any idea if Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Mr. O'Neill, any other plans?
Is Gordon hoping to bring Connor across?
Yeah, I think so. So by the end of the vote, we should hopefully have a resolution for you. To those, Mr. Gallagher, are you certain that Woodwork would be a bad idea this evening? That it's
I'm just saying the fact that it's one of the places where a lot of Northern Ireland supporters go, and actually there were a lot of Swiss people there earlier as well. It could be.
The Swiss are a little bit covered.
Last time she was really packed.
Really packed.
Because I started with this.
Okay, good stuff. Well then we shall endeavour to find somewhere else. In fact, okay, good. So now we're working then. Miss O'Neill is covering it. I always forget
Switzerland are leading 1-0 as well.
Are they?
One of the great
Good to know. We have to leave this one at some point, folks. Because I mean, it's ring parlour, so we'll find out shortly if we can head there. But hopefully the cards are in hand now. Mr. O'Neill, Mr. ready. So, this is a vote on speaker ability. If you believe that the proposition spoke better this evening on the motion of this House believes NI can have a post-sectarian election, please raise your hand on your membership cards and say aye! Aye. Keep them up, keep them up, keep them up. 1, 2, 3,
Fionnbharr, Edmund,
4,
vote for yourself.
5, 6, 5. We'll go with 5 then. All those who believe that the opposite, we are going hard, it seems, ladies and gentlemen. All those who believe that the opposition spoke better this evening, please raise your hand and say nay. Nay. Keep them up, keep them up, keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And all those who believe each side spoke equally well, equally terribly, or wish to express no opinion on the motion whatsoever, or just wish to cast no vote whatsoever, please raise your hand, say it loud, say it proud, say meh! Meh! So let's keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 11. 11 it is. Now, Mr. Acting Secretary, could you please read the vote back to me?
The propositions have 5 votes, the opposition have 12, and the abstentions have 11. So the opposition has it.
The opposition has it. I believe we are adjourned to parliament. The time is 25 past 9. I declare the meeting adjourned.
Oh, the realm of darkness.